Hello everyone, my name's Janine Coomber and I'm the Knowledge Exchange Manager in the Knowledge Exchange and Innovation Department at the University of Kent. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to our networking and knowledge event here today. So thank you very much for taking part in that networking session that you've all just been diving in. We've been trying to recreate that environment where you might have been having a chat with people before coming to an event like this. So hopefully that went some way towards achieving a little bit of a conversation at the beginning. So obviously our session today is flexible working post-pandemic and return to work with Dr. Hee-Jung Chung. And in terms of what our department delivers, this is very much an important part of business support that the university provides in making sure that professionals and our business community can be aware of the latest research and findings that are going on in the university that can really help you in your day-to-day work and to help your organisation grow and develop in whatever way suits the most. So obviously at the minute having expertise such as Hee-Jung in our university is fantastic. Obviously, in terms of working with the university, it might be that some of you in attendance are already partnering with us in different ways. It might be you've partnering on collaborative research projects. You might have been accessing funding with us. You might have had interns. Or it might be that you've actually come to us and this is your first interaction with us, having newly joined the HR network, which is our building community and a really great way that we've been recently reaching out to lots more HR professionals to help let them know about the sorts of work that the university offers. So welcome to those of you who are joining this sort of session for the very first time, and hopefully it is a start and you'll be encouraged to hear about the expertise within the university and how we could hopefully work with your organisations together further. So today's session should be valuable to any organisation. We've all been going through this pandemic and the considerations of working from home and flexible working. So it might be new to some of us, but Dr. Hee-Jung Chung has been working in this area for over 15 years. So she's very well researched in it, but obviously recently this has taken a whole new meaning. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about Hee-Jung. She is a reader in sociology and social policy with us, and her research areas are around flexible working, work-life balance, a 4-day week and gender equality. And obviously it is the recent changes to her research that's very applicable for us today. She has had a very active research career and has been an advisor for a number of years to the UK government. So this includes departments such as the UK Department for Business and Energy and Industrial Strategies, and this is on issues around flexible working, maternity and paternity leave, and also the government's Equalities Office on how to tackle the gender gap. As well as nationally for us, she has had international impact working with the EU Commission and also governments across the whole world on these issues. So really sort of international career in this area. She has been recognised for her work in being shortlisted and a finalist for the Cantor Awards, which recognise excellence in research in work and family. So that's under a great deal of scrutiny. She's been assessed as in the top research in those areas. And so we're really lucky to have her here speaking today. As you would expect from a sociologist, Hee-Jung is has a very interactive style to her research and her teaching, and she would love to hear more questions from you, what you're thinking, what your approaches are after her talk. So please do use the chat to sort of write your questions as you go along, and I'll be keeping an eye on these, and I'll be able to present those back to Hee-Jung at the end so that we can really drill down into those areas that you're thinking about, and she can really help answer, drawing on her own research, but equally, the research in the sector that she's also obviously has worked in, like I say, for 15 years. So I'll stop talking now and I will hand you over to Hee-Jung to start our main part of the presentation. So many thanks.
Okay, so yes, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very excited to take part in this. So my name is Hee-Jung. As Janine has already introduced me to a great extent, I won't go into great detail, but today I just wanted to kind of bring together a body of research that I've been conducting for a very long period of time to kind of share with you and possibly answer any questions that you may have in relation to flexible working post-pandemic and how we should bring workers back to work. And many of you noticed that there has been a huge change in the way we work, in the world of work post-pandemic. And many say that, the way we work, when we even think about work, or work itself has changed forever due to the pandemic. Recently, the BBC has conducted a survey, and the results were saying that, majority of the large businesses that they've surveyed said that they will not have workers come back to the office on a full-time basis. And we see a whole range of companies also declaring that they are going to be asking, workers or encouraging workers to spend work from home on a more permanent basis. For example, BP has notified that 40% of the week will be working from home for their staff. And HSBC, for example, I think this was in February or March of this year, even got rid of office spaces during the pandemic, in response to a whole range of different things, but including a need to kind of cut costs because of the pandemic and the economic impact the crisis had. So we see a lot of movement towards working from home. We also see that it's not necessarily always the case. We see CEOs from especially big financial companies talking about how they don't want to work from home, that working from home doesn't work for a certain part of people. JP Morgan CEO said it doesn't work for young people because young people like to hustle. Goldman Sachs was in the news many, many times, especially during early this year. And he also said that he doesn't want to have the new normal there. He's fed up with Zooms, and that, for the financial services, that this doesn't work. Just yesterday, or was it today? Yesterday, the WeWork CEO said that people who are comfortable working from home are the least engaged in their work. So although we see a huge kind of demand for and possibly a shift towards flexible working and working from home, we see that it's not necessarily the case. What we see from the WeWork CEO is that there's still some kind of misconceptions about flexible working or working from home. So I want to kind of answer some of those questions and any questions that you have. So today I want to first talk about, has COVID-19 triggered a renaissance of flexible working? Have we really seen a change? Are we really going to see a dramatic change in the future of work in relation to not only working from home, but also flexible working as a whole? So I'm going to show you some trends and workers' preferences towards flexible working. Just in case, if you hear some weird sound in the background, that's my dog gnawing on a piece of bone. So you can hear like, so I do apologize, but that's the only way that will keep her happy while I do this talk. And I'm also going to talk a bit about the experiences of managers, again, drawing from my own survey, but surveys of others, and what managers and workers said were the benefits and the potential negative outcomes of working from home. Which kind of leads us to the next bit, which is I'm going to possibly answer some of the key questions that I've been hearing from managers over the years. So how should we introduce working from home policies in organizations? So it's like, should we even, introduce it? For what reasons? Like, to whom? How many days? Can I trust workers to work efficiently and productively? Do I need to monitor workers? How can we address some of the major issues around isolation and collaboration when workers work from home? And finally, how can I ensure diversity and inclusion when working from home in the hybrid model of working? Most importantly, because we did start a little bit early, I want to spend some time with you for Q&A. And as Janine mentioned, I would, we are really, we would like to encourage you to ask any, it could be clarification questions, but any questions that you may have in your organizations or in general, maybe even for yourself as a worker working from home, that you might have that I might, be able to answer. Just a second. Okay, that's enough now. Okay. So a bit about myself. So I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of background of where I'm drawing the evidence of today's presentation. So as Janine mentioned, I've been, working on flexible working since the beginning of my PhD. So it's approximately 15 years. I've been, especially focused firstly on working time schedules and then working from home, looking at all sorts of issues around workers' access to, companies' provision of, and more importantly, the outcomes of flexible working and the importance of context context. More importantly, I was rewarded the Economic Social Research Council fund to work on looking at some of the access to and outcomes of flexible working, again, focusing on, flexi time and working from home arrangements, which ran from about 2013 to 2018, but, we can keep continuing the outputs for that. And, last year we conducted with the University of Birmingham, I conducted 2 surveys. One is surveys of workers working from home and their experiences working from home, where we gathered approximately 1,200 respondents for the surveys, mostly focused on parents and their experiences. And in September, August, September, we've also asked managers of how they have experienced working from home or how they felt managing workers working from home during the pandemic, which I will draw from. But again, I would like to draw from some of the work that my collaborators have done. At the end of the presentation, I will show you a list with hyperlinks, which you could access to reports. This includes the Charter Institute for Personnel Development, the Charter Management Institute, Fatherhood Institute, etc. Yeah, a little plug is that next year, I'll also be publishing a book called The Flexibility Paradox, where a lot of the information that I will be talking about today and so many more based on the kind of the 15 years of research will be in a book format, which will be coming out with Policy Press. Now, without further ado, first thing, the trends in flexible working or working from home. So before the pandemic, as many of you probably noticed, is that not many people are working from home. According to the ONS, the official, the UK Office for National Statistics, which has the most official and representative data in this area, approximately 5% of the whole working population was working from home more on a permanent basis, so day-to-day basis, kind of exclusively. So not very much. Approximately about 15 to 17%, depending on the data, were working from home on a kind of on a regular basis, but in this case, kind of several times a month, maybe once a week basis, which means, majority of our workers were working maybe 1 or 2 days, but then mostly just, when the plumber comes in or when there is an urgent demand that people were working from home. But generally, there wasn't been that huge levels of working from home. Now, the interesting thing is the UK government introduced a right to request flexible working, where initially parents, but it has been extended to all workers, have the right to request to work from home. So in legislative terms, since the beginning in 2003 up to 2014, where this legislation was accessible to all workers, there has been a huge change in workers' right to work from home. And as you know, there has been a huge level of technological developments over the past 2 decades, where essentially this is our office, where a phone you can literally do majority of your work inside your phone, right? Now, even despite that, if you look at the data of representative kind of data of the working population of the UK, we didn't see much of a change. So the 10 to about 15% of workforce working from home hasn't changed since 2001. Again, despite the technological changes, despite software changes, and despite the legal right to request flexible working. Now, that has changed dramatically over the pandemic. There are different data sets, but approximately half of the workforce, I mean, including everyone, has worked from home. And as you can see, again, this is from the Office for National Statistics, shows that some of our occupations, such as professional occupations, we're talking about 3/4 of workers working from home. And as many of you know, especially these workers who were in kind of the top occupational groups and white collar workers, they were working from home on an exclusive basis, which means that they were working every day during the pandemic, especially the first lockdown in the UK. A couple of other interesting trends I want to show here. So we always found that even pre-pandemic times, managers, professionals, associate professionals, those are the occupations where you see the most kind of working from home or other types of flexible working. One of the things that you noticed during the pandemic was that administrative and secretarial occupation, a very female-dominated occupation, which initially did not have that much access to flexible working, and working from home has had a great access to flexible working. So this is a one major change. What the other thing is to see that some of these occupations where managers have always said that it is impossible to work from home, actually a lot of the work has been carried out by home. And as you know, many of you know that, you now see your GP through your phone, consultancy, but also like education and all sorts of even like retail sales occupations are now moving to the virtual space, driven by the need because of having to do social distancing measure during the lockdown periods, but also demands because people are now increasingly wanting this virtual or kind of online interaction for these occupations as well. Now, what has this changed? What has this dramatic increase in flexible working led to? I think one of the most dramatic changes is the way we think about flexible working. So this is data from the 2011 Work-Life Balance Survey, which is unfortunately one of the most recent representative surveys of the UK workforce. We see that approximately a third or even more than a third of the workforce have what we consider flexibility stigma. They think flexible workers make more work for others. Flexible working leads to negative career consequences. So people have, have for a long period of time, and this is one of the reasons why I haven't seen a huge kind of explosion of flexible work in the past 2 decades. People still believe that, you work from home, so you're not really working, and people have this image of skiving off where people actually just kind of watch TV or, do something else, do the washing and cleaning, but not really do work. And so there has been some of that negative connotation towards people working from home. We see similar results in the 2018 British Social Attitude Survey or Eurobarometer survey. It's approximately like about 30% of workers believe that kind of stigma. Now, because working from home was imposed by the government as a part of the social distancing measures and lockdown measures, we see that the changes towards these perceptions has dramatically changed. So I wanted to focus kind of then, it's like working from home has a negative impact on your career. So only about 10% of people who were working from home believed this was to be the case, compared to a third pre-lockdown. And, again, working from home negatively impacting colleagues, this has almost disappeared as well. And we also see a 90% of workers who were working from home during the lockdown felt that the managers were quite supportive of it. But obviously this was the case because during this period, legally, the only options you had for people who could have work done at home was you either work from home or you don't do any work at all. So we see that there has been a huge change in managers and workers' perception towards, working from home. We also see that managers have, again, changed their perceptions in terms of working from home. Again, this is based on managers asking like, is flexible working a flexible performance enhancing tool? Although we do see that a lot of managers thought this way, this has increased dramatically over the COVID-19 period, where more managers feel like it's not necessarily, conflicts against performance enhancing purposes. Similarly, the Charter Management Institute report of managers around August and September, the Charter Institute for Personnel Development Manager surveys all indicate that approximately 2/3 to 3/4 of managers have noted that performance has not dropped when workers were working from home, that it had maintained or it actually increased. Approximately about a quarter to a third of managers say that productivity has increased over the period when we're working from home. Now, this has led to quite a drastic change in the preferences for working from home, where now more workers want to work from home. And I will show you why this is the case, especially kind of looking at the positive kind of experiences. And more managers want to support working from home, again, based on the very positive experiences that people have had. An interesting study from Buffer looked at workers who were currently working from home, 98% that they want to work flexibly, although this is American-based. With our survey, we saw that 3/4 of all parents said that they like work from home, regardless of whether they did. And a lot of parents are even thinking about reducing their working hours because of the positive experiences that they had. More recently, this is a really large-scale survey, approximately 5,000 UK respondents in January. So this is after even the second lockdown. So when asked how often would you like to have, work from home, we see that this is, just an indicative survey of many, many surveys that came out related to this, where approximately 1 out of 5 workers want to more than half want to work at least 3 days a week. And I think this is really key, that it's not just about working from home, the capacity to work from home a day a week, but workers now want to work majority of their time at home and only go into the office when it need be. Managers are also responding similarly. The recent CIPD survey said 63% of employers say they plan to introduce and expand the use of hybrid working. And 45, again, half of the managers survey from the, again, very representative survey of managers said they are introducing possibly a 5-day week homework. And not necessarily possibly for all workers, but a huge proportion of companies are looking into this. And we'll see that this is going to be the case, especially possibly for smaller companies and larger companies. Smaller companies, it will be done in informal policies. Larger companies will introduce formal policies around this. Medium-sized companies might be caught in the middle because you can't do formal policies because you don't have the resources and the capacity to do so, yet you can't just rely on informal policies. Also, this will largely depend on the business's culture. This is why we see like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs resisting working from home, and not necessarily because they can't work from home, because financial services is probably one of the best kind of industries to have people work from home. It's more about the culture, but maybe we'll talk about that a bit later. But why are people still wanting to work from home? So why do workers want to work from home? One of the key causes, and I think many of us have already experienced it, especially a year on after the first lockdown, or more than a year on, is that working from home provides us with a very limited resource that everybody needs, and that is time. The reduction of commuting times for many workers, especially men and fathers, it lasted up to about 2 hours. And many of people who live in the Southeast know that, especially commuting up to London, it's about time, energy, and money. So by allowing workers to work, especially, almost exclusively or exclusively from home, and that they've saved time. 2 days, 2 hours a day is an extra working day in a way. They've saved energy and money to spend more time with family and children. We see that especially among parents, but also among, non-parents, couples, but also, like people had enjoyed spending time with their friends or their pets. Many of us have gained pets over the lockdown period, and it has just given them that gift of time. They're more able to combine work with other activities. And again, this could be housework, childcare, but also it could be leisure work. It could be any other kind of combining activities that they like to do, which has had an impact on mental and physical health. So a lot of workers have indicated that working from home has improved mental health. And again, this is despite the fact that, yes, COVID-19 has had also a negative impact on mental health outcomes because of isolation issues, which I will talk about later. But working from home in itself has helped improve mental health for many workers. A lot of workers talk about improved productivity, more focused, less distracted work. And we also see similar outcomes being said by managers. But it wasn't all positive. And this is something that, we need to consider when we think about some of the future questions we have in terms of the future of flexible working. One of the key things is that blurred boundaries. When you work in your office and your home space is the same space, it's very difficult to kind of have clear boundaries where work ends and home begins, or home ends and work begins. People have noted that they were unable to shut off from work a lot of times. People have also said that they're working longer hours because it's just so easy, especially during the pandemic when you couldn't really go out and socialize with friends. People have kind of resorted back to doing work all the time and everywhere. There are some other negative impacts, such as multitasking, doing work with other thing, and then it's just the feeling of time pressure, especially among parents. This is especially during the lockdown and where the school closures made parents have to juggle both work with childcare and housework demands. Well, the key things, again, this is not only due to the lockdown, but possibly may have been exacerbated was isolation. People felt very isolated and less connected with colleagues. And there are some issues around collaboration. Some other negative experiences, and again, this could be overcome very easily with proper company policies, was lack of equipment or dedicated space to work, or internet connection and software issues. And again, these are mostly based on workers' survey, but we see similar results from manager surveys as well, not just of ours, but of other people. So kind of putting that together, what are some of the key questions we need to ask moving forward, when we think about flexible working post-pandemic? So the first question is very simple, right? As HR managers, which I think most of you are, the question is, should I let workers work from home? Should we introduce working from home policies, or should we just go back straight to the office? Now, the first thing I'll say is that, as I've shown you, majority of workers, with the exception of maybe 1 out of 5 workers, want to work from home. Rishi Sunak said that, if you make workers work from home, that they'll leave. Actually, based on data, based on our surveys, what we see is that workers are willing to quit their job, leave their job, if you make them come back to the office 5 days a week. And this is the general trends that we're seeing. So not only are majority of workers wanting to work from home, if they're not given that opportunity, you will be having issues with recruitment, retaining workers, but also with loyalty and commitment, because you are going against the preferences and demands, and possibly the changed expectations of workers. But having said that, this shouldn't also make you think, okay, then everybody works from home, we'll get rid of office spaces, because this is going to be depending on the type of workers you have, the age groups, and the constraints that each worker has. But not everybody wants to work from home. Some people don't have the space. Some people, especially young workers, may need to kind of go into the office to learn about the work culture and have more, hands-on and, workplace training. Others, and a lot of people think mothers all want to work from home, but that is not necessarily the case. I've talked to many mothers who have actually wanted the clear boundaries so that they could focus on work at work and then come back home and tend to those issues. Either way, there's no clear kind of structure of who would want to work from home and who doesn't. But what we need to think is about who wants to. You need to know and ask your own workers who wants to work from home, and also decide as a team what works best to achieve the goals of the group. Now, the second question is, who should work from home? And then, as I said, it really should be a conversation between managers and workers, rather than managers deciding on what works best. There is some reports saying that more mothers might want to work from home, and I'll talk about a bit why that is the case. But essentially, it's to do with the social norm around household responsibilities, that many mothers had to work part-time or reduce hours, or could not really engage in the workplace as much as they wanted to when they were unable to work from home or work flexibly. Now, working from home has enabled that kind of much more larger engagement in the workplace for women with care responsibilities, and mostly mothers, but also others with other care responsibilities. Now, Fathers may not want to work from home, not because they don't want to, but it might be that it's to do with the stigma that I've spoke about in the earlier part of the presentation, that they might feel that it might come with career penalties. So if you have, let's say, a workforce where a majority of women and mothers work at home and fathers and men work in the office, you might end up with a two-tiered system. So those in the office may receive more career advancement opportunities, as studies have shown, and with, we might still see a comeback of the flexibility stigma if we're not, if we don't manage these kind of work from home policies properly. So to try to overcome that, one of the key things we need to do is to make very clear communications about that, normalizing working from home, but making clear communications about sure that the people who are working from home are not penalized, are not, missing opportunities or any kind of engagement that can only be done in the office. The third question that I get a lot, and I mean, I think, maybe it has changed, but possibly not. Can I trust workers to be productive at home? Do we still kind of see like work from home and that people think, oh, well, actually, they're not really working from home? Now, again, this is based on the study during pandemic, but also pre-pandemic times. So I've conducted studies to show that people who work flexibly work longer and harder. And this is pre-pandemic. During the pandemic times as well, we see that workers working from home were working more hours. They've increased the number of hours that they work. So it's not just people working, we're comparing them, but the same people, when they were working from home, they tend to work longer hours. We see some VPN analysis. And what we see is that because people don't need to commute, they log into work much earlier. So even when, when they were working in the office, they'll start work at 9, but we see a lot of people working from 8 a.m. or even 7 a.m. onwards. There'll be a little bit of a dip, a longer dip during lunchtime where people have lunch, but also maybe go for their midday walk. But then they also, and then this is a more worrying trend, is that lots of people seem to be working later into the day, into the evening, which, can be really problematic, and I'll come back to this. There's a whole range of reasons why this is the case. If there is time later on in Q&A, I could elaborate a bit further. But the point is that workers working from home work longer and harder rather than the other way around. So our assumption, our popular belief about, oh, working from home, you're not really working, are you, is a complete myth. In most cases, statistically. So when we are looking at larger group of workers, I am not saying no one does that, but I'm just saying that on average, that is just a myth. So this is the second question. Okay, so if they're productive, should I monitor them? And we are seeing, so this is again, based on a survey saying that 1 out of 5 employers are thinking of monitoring remote workers or planning to do so. This is a very worrying trend because monitoring workers, having much more tighter control over looking at exactly when people clock in and clock out, or making sure like workers need to do certain activities to be, to count as working hours, can lead to negative outcomes. And this is the kind of the control paradox that we see in many, experimental studies, etc., that the more control and monitoring you do, you might actually end up workers meeting those little tiny demands, but not actually being able to be productive or actually being committed and doing good work. It can also lead to more disruption in work. So there's studies that talk about having good chunk of time to really go into work, so needing deep work, and such monitoring devices may actually interrupt that kind of deep work processes. And all of these kind of monitoring, not all, but a lot of these monitoring are based on very antiquated, kind of old industrialized ideas about productivity, where we think bums on seats, hours in front of the computer equates to output and commitment. And that is completely wrong. And it's the way it's counterproductive in the work from home. The reason why working from home leads to increased productivity is that it provides workers more autonomy over when and where and how work is done. So in a way, if we want to really tap into the benefits of that productivity gains of working from home, when you enable workers to work from home, you need to almost give the workers and trust the workers. They know when, how, and where to work themselves best. And as a team, there needs to be communication, but in a way, you need to be able to trust workers. So, and actually, if you want to monitor workers, what you need to monitor is overworking. As I mentioned, workers tend to work too much, maybe, when they're working from home, which can lead to very negative outcomes, not just for the individual, but for as a team as a whole. And that's something we need to monitor. Again, trust and communication is key. So a CMI report has shown that managers who tend to trust workers to know what they're doing have seen better productivity outcomes during the pandemic. McKinsey report also shows how clear communications, organizations where there has been clear communications about what is expected of workers during teleworking policies have had much better outcomes in terms of productivity as well. And again, what I want to say is that trust your workers to know when and how to do their work, and move away from the ideas that working longer hours in front of the computer is essential, is some sort of sign of output or productivity or commitment. And to do that, I think what we need to think about is to really have very clear targets and goals at work that are set out by the team as a team, and possibly, use approaches like Agile approach, where we kind of track those, or Trello, where you could track the kind of developments of how the project is developing, rather than trying to monitor people and their work through computer or like sound, which is again, counterproductive. So next question. So how many days should people work from home? And this is an interesting question, because I've seen some managers or companies try to limit the amount of days. So it's like, okay, we'll let you work from home because everybody wants to, but you could only do 1 or 2 days maximum. Now, what we see here, again, this is this is based on yet another study. This is based on McKinsey's study of employees across the world. But it's, again, the general trend is we see approximately 1 out of 5 workers want to work from home on a permanent basis. Like they don't want to come back to the office. A lot of workers want to work 3 to 4 days, and that's really the most kind of popular choice. Some workers only 1 a day, and again, about 1 out of 5, a bit less than 1 out of 5 in most cases, they want to work in the office. I think people actually want to work more than 3 days in the office. It's just that they are maybe this kind of survey response may be also influenced by the fear of career penalties, that if you were to be at home all the time, that there might be some sort of career penalty. We need to be very careful about like how many days people work from home, because I think a lot of the benefits that you can have for hybrid and virtual offices could only happen when there are more days people work from home. So we're talking about when people are generally working from home is the norm, then we could actually change the norm about where things happen. So online collaboration needs to be online, or meetings need to be online. So you could actually make investment into those software and hardware, such as, Basecamp, et cetera, which I could answer what they are later on if anyone wants to. Has any questions around that. Also, enabling more days at home provides geographical mobility of workers, enabling better work-life balance, but also enabling better access to jobs and quality of life for workers and their families. So again, what that means is people, if you only need to come into the office once a week, or maybe, like even less than once a week, it essentially allows people to move away from high, real estate priced areas and go into more leafier areas of the UK, and possibly which can help benefit, that it helps, people save money from commuting. It helps people to move into places that are geographically more suitable for them and their families, which can, drastically improve their well-being. And also for the companies themselves, if you were to have longer working from home days, then you might be able to cut down on office cost, rental, and running costs. Now, there is still an issue around isolation and collaboration. So not to go into too much detail here, because, I've mindful that I've just spent a lot of time speaking. one of the things I want to think about is one of the reasons why people have issues around isolation and collaboration is because when we were working in the office, we used to spend a lot of time chatting to each other and socializing. When this is something we tend to forget about, is that especially countries where hours of work are very long, like the US and the UK and Korea, people tend to build friendships at work. And a UK survey before the pandemic has shown that people spent approximately an hour a day chatting to people about non-work related things, and making coffee and doing all sorts of other work that you actually do real work for 3 hours a day. I think people are less likely to do that at home because because you're at home, whatever other non-work activity you do, you tend to feel like it's non-work. And I think in a way, this home working and online teams, etc., we've optimized work too much so that we kind of cut out some of the unnecessary parts of work, including chit chats with colleagues. So in a way, we need to almost bring this back, but not through Zoom. But there's a whole bunch of other ways of doing it. These are like hubs where you could have little emoticons to interact with. Essentially, we need to make more intentional spaces for these collaboration to happen, and possibly not just the spaces, but also making check-ins to talk about non-work things. When workers and managers talk about non-work related, outside of work related things, it has been proven to help workers increase loyalty, motivation, have better work-life balance. I mean, another way is that we try to focus these offline office days really for that collaborative team building exercise, so that it isn't necessarily you just work a day, you do the same thing in the office, but make the office space very deliberate about what can we only do in the office, which we can't do online. I mean, another thing I want to talk about also is like who was benefiting from the old office collaboration. So there's been a lot of literature in these, or sociology of organizations, which talk about it was mostly white men in a way networking because of the way it was set up. And this is kind of Mad Men, that back in those 1950s when the offices, the kind of antiquated, let's say, office space was developed. So what I'm trying to say is that women, especially part-time working women or part-time workers in general, BAME, disabled, LGBTQ, and other groups may have not benefited as much in terms of collaboration, socializing in the office space. And the virtual office spaces can possibly provide safer, more neutral spaces for everyone to take part. So I have like, for an example, I was talking to an accountant who is, in the area. And now that she says that she has to from home, before, because she's a mother, she wasn't able to go to these meetings, especially when they were like in, up in Manchester or somewhere else, across geographically far away. Whereas now she's been able to really engage with colleagues across the whole region, across the whole country, where she's been able to engage much more and be visible. And this has provided her a much more beneficial possibility for collaboration. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have to possibly rethink collaboration networking when we think about the virtual office space, because again, it might be that certain demographics might be benefiting from these online collaboration who may have not benefited before. Finally, kind of related to that, so can work from home meet diversity inclusion goals? And again, when the flexible right to request flexible working was introduced in the UK, when it was introduced in the European Commission, at the heart of it was about gender inequality and the gender pay gap. Theresa May actually mentioned in one of her speeches how flexible working is key into meeting some of these kind of gender inequality, or like eradicating some of these gender inequality patterns we see persistent in the UK. Now, there's two sides of this. One is that, yes, increasing working from home will really help address the gender pay gap. As I mentioned, working from home and giving workers more access to flexi time enables mothers to stay at work and work longer hours and not move to part-time when they have children, especially given that women's dropping out of the labor market or moving to part-time is the key reason why the gender pay gap exists. And this is, at the organizational level, at the national aggregate level. We can really retain that valuable female and other, people with care responsibility resources when we introduce, a large scale kind of flexible working policy. And especially, if we have working from home as more like 4 or 5 days, so as a norm where we don't, we don't expect workers to come in, let's say only once every fortnight or something, that really opens up career opportunities. So there's a huge body of literature again showing that women's career opportunities are limited because they usually are the ones who are responsible for children. So they tend to kind of live where the children's school is or where their husbands work is. So by enabling that geographical mobility, really we're thinking about enhancing women's careers. And especially when men are also able to work from home, this can provide women to free up women's labor to take larger part in the labor market and, again, develop their careers better. And as I mentioned before, as the virtual office collaboration becomes the norm, it would also enhance that career opportunity for women as well. Having said that, if we only let women work from home or mothers work from home, this actually might end up penalizing women because there will be stigma against kind of people working from home, especially women working from home, which we've seen in previous data as well. Also, having only women work from home while the father just kind of goes into the office, we're kind of running into issues around traditionalizing gender roles. So women are expected to do more housework and child care when they work from home, whereas men are not. So when we only get women to work from, we might actually end up making women do more than they were doing before. So in a way, we need to ensure that, in a way, kind of ironically, we need to ensure men and non-mothers to work from home if we want to ensure that working from home policies can meet diversity and inclusion goals. So then at the moment, this is based on the Fatherhood Institute study just came out yesterday or this week, where there is a huge demand from fathers to work from home. So fathers have been reporting, especially, fathers who have been working from home, report that they've had huge, improvement in relation with their children. They've spent more time with children, doing a lot of housework and childcare, and they have felt better. They have reported better well-being outcomes for themselves when they were doing these activities. And 76, so 3/4 of fathers who worked from home want to do that in the future, want to work flexibly in the future. 63% want to work from home and from the future. And again, I think those numbers are not really indicating the real true demand for flexible working because many of them still fear the career penalties of working from home and possibly the lack of career opportunities when they work from home, which we have seen again pre-pandemic data. And again, to meet that diversity goal, we need to normalize flexible working for the whole population, including and possibly even modeling. And so to kind of sum it up, and I'd like to say again, the working genie is out of the bottle. So we have seen that the pandemic has drastically shifted our views about flexible working, both managers and workers. There's going to be a rise in demand for flexible working, and possibly it will expected to continue into the future. And to meet this, I think, not only thinking about flexible working, we need to rethink work. So to move away from the hours-based assumption of productivity and commitment, we need to really think more about the target-driven matrices, about how, it doesn't matter how you get there, as long as workers meet those targets, we need to kind of, support that kind of success of meeting targets, rather than kind of coming into the office 9 hours, 9 hours a day, and that's what work is. So we need to redefine work as what's being done rather than where, how long, and when it's being done. Also, we need to be a bit more intentional about work from home policies. Again, based on the McKinsey report, but CMI report, etc., there has to be very clear communications about this, that it isn't about long hours, bums on seat, faces in front of computer cameras that we're looking at. And, in a way, the key part of that is, communications and trust workers to know what they're doing, know how they could do it best, and make sure that there is that mutual, goal that can be met for the team and company. And, it's not necessarily always going to, work as the first goal, but, be reflective and reorganize to see what is working and what isn't. So here is some more information. And again, these are all hyperlinked. I'm sure these slides will be kind of handed out to you. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing any questions anyone has. So yes, okay, the slides will be posted, but please, ask any questions you have.
Thank you, Hee-jung. I just wanted to say thanks very much for that. And I mean, there's just absolutely tons of information coming through. So what I'll do is I'll sort of scan through the chat, and if people want to ask any questions there, then I can translate them to you. Or equally, if now we're sort of towards the question and answer stage of this session, if people do want to raise their hand and sort of unmute themselves and ask the question themselves, then I'm happy for that as well. I'll keep sort of skimming across my my screen to be able to see if people are asking any questions. So yes, your first question was a simple one. So a bit more about your book on flexible working. So I suppose that's the first opportunity to just talk a little bit more about your book in itself.
Yeah, the book is about flexible working. It's really bringing together, again, the body of research that I've been carrying out. So it starts off by looking at some of the trends of flexible working that we've seen, like, is it increasing? Is it not? Who has access to it? Who doesn't? And then it looks at some of the outcomes, and most importantly, about kind of how flexible working makes workers work longer hours, and how that's slightly different from men and women. So men end up doing more overtime, unpaid overtime hours, whereas women end up doing kind of unpaid overtime. So they do more overtime. So in terms of they extend their working hours, but they also extend their kind of care time and housework time, which means that they crowd out leisure time and sleep when they work flexibly, which has very negative consequences to their health and mental and physical health.
Thank you. So there's another question. So with the work from home way of working, are people experiencing occupational health issues more, such as back pains, neck pains? So I suppose that's the sort of health well-being side of being at home.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen that. And again, we have to understand, this working from home explosion that we've seen during the pandemic wasn't an intentional, well-planned policy. It just happened overnight, where the government has introduced, really literally overnight, like, everybody who can work from home needs to work from home. So there's been a huge panic in organizations trying to hand out people computers and notebooks, etc. And obviously during that process, we haven't been able to give people the necessary equipment, including, any kind of desks and chairs, etc. So, people have been working on top of just piles of books or cardboard boxes, and we have seen some issues around that. Having said that, I think going forward, there has to be a very serious kind of consideration about what to do about this, ensuring that workers have the equipment and the, it may be hardware, software in terms of technological equipment, but also the kind of furniture necessary. I think many people have already purchased it, knowing that the lockdown was not going to end in 3 weeks, as many have predicted in the beginning of March in 2020. And I think that would be something that we'll have to look into the future in terms of, government policies ensuring that companies provide those to workers.
Thank you. So the next question is, are there any studies that look at business leaders or CEOs' views of flexible working? Oh, sorry, it's just skimmed down a bit. Flexible working, given that they often determine the culture of an organisation. So that's that sort of top down angle.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. So actually, the CEO, the business leaders' perceptions are really key, and we've seen how certain types of demographics or organizations, you're not going to see a huge kind of change in that belief because that's what worked. This was what we've done thus far, and so in a way, I guess one of the key things that we need to do is to change business leaders' views about the way that they've succeeded in terms of ways of work may not necessarily fit for anyone else. And by doing that, you're hindering the organization's progress in making sure that you get the best talent and use that talent accordingly. And, we keep, as scientists, all we can do is provide evidence, and we just need those ears to listen.
Claire, I can see you nodding. That question was from you. Was that answered your question? Yeah. Thank you. So the next question is, do you think flexible working would become a factor in recruitment criteria?
Absolutely. And one of the things that the government was planning to do before the crisis hit, there was a review of different policies, one of which is about flexible working. And I mean, it's still ongoing, and we, do watch the space. BEIS is going to be, BEIS is planning a huge report, including the review of flexible working rights at the end of this year, which may change the right. One of the things that even its own government, so the Government Equality Office, has been pursuing was to make flexible working as a job description, as a norm, that unless it does not, that there is a very specific reason why flexible working cannot be done, that it should be listed as a job in the job description as being possible, and that there should be a conversation about that. So we think, and that possibly as a part of the gender pay gap reporting is to look at how many jobs are being done flexibly, or how many jobs are being out as a job description as being possible for flexible working. Because as I said, even Theresa May herself has, when she was PM, noted that flexible working is a key policy into achieving that gender equality, that maybe we will see that the government will be issuing companies to report on how many people are working flexibly, how many people are taking up, let's say, shared parental leave, and what does your job applications, person specifications look like?
Thank you. So, the next was a reply from Clemency about the that she's had to get a footrest, and even when I was listening to you saying that I've got a backrest here that I wouldn't have had at work and things like that, I was wondering if we could use like the reactions buttons, like everyone who's bought something, I'm going to do like a little thumbs up that sort of I bought a something that would help my back, or things like that. To see sort of how we've got a few thumbs up coming there. Yeah, so yeah, a few thumbs up across the groups. Yeah, all of us getting equipment to make ourselves more comfortable at home. So the next question is, some companies have been working almost 100% remotely for several years. So how do they promote their employees? And then also, how do you see the relationship between the generations in the office? So sometimes seeing that their positions are so different that it's necessary to develop a common communication space. So I suppose that's one question about promoting the employees that have been 100% virtual, and then also that necessity across generations in the office, having some common space.
And again, I don't want to do away with the office space altogether. And I think the office space can be very useful for people to come together and have meetings that are really for team building and collaboration. And I think that necessarily, it doesn't have to be the office, but, physical space where we meet together. And promotion, I'm not sure exactly if I understood the question correctly, but obviously, as I said, unfortunately, despite what managers might think, there's a huge element of that, people were in the office for long periods of time, burning and will be promoted, irrespective of what they were actually producing during that time. And I think working from home actually enables us to see better what the workers have done. It doesn't matter if you have, for example, met the target of, let's say, 100 new contracts in the span of a week rather than a month. Good on you. Rather than you spending like 12 hours into the midnight doing that. So it's essentially about making sure that you have clear targets that workers know that they need to meet. And actually, it's a much better way of optimizing our work processes. And again, I think, if you have those clear targets, it's very easy who to promote because that who met those targets and how. And in a way, I always say that, and this is kind of related to the second question about 4-day week. Why are we promoting people who are spending long hours in the office? Because the only reason why we do that is because historically we have promoted and privileged, that we've equated kind of commitment as, okay, if you sacrifice other aspects of your life, you must be committed to workplace. That is not necessarily the case. And again, people who have better work-life balance, who are able to meet other demands, are better workers because they have all sorts of other kind of ways in which they can express themselves. So this is, I do think the 4-day week is very advantage. It can really be very good way of meeting some of the goals for workers and businesses. And again, working from home 4-day week, the point is it doesn't matter how long it takes, where you do it or when you do it, as long as those targets are there, let workers choose how to do it. You don't need to sit there and be like, oh, have you clocked in 8 hours a day? You just give them the targets, review the targets as we do in agile programming. If some of you may know about this, review the targets, make sure that you could get there, and then review it on a short-term or longer-term basis. You don't need to monitor how long it took. And if it takes too long, then you need to actually think about, oh, maybe this was the wrong target, or maybe it's too much. But, it shouldn't be that, someone who works long should be equated to commitment or productivity at all.
Thank you. I can see Marissa there. Did that answer your question? That's okay. And then that sort of, you moved on to the discussing the 4-day week as well. I'd be interested a little bit more on that, about the difference in terms of advantageousness for people and business, whether it's both automatically, or how much it would be, of benefit for perhaps one side more than the other, and whether that's come through in your research, or whether it's almost the same for both. Just to spend a bit more on that 4-day week.
Oh, on the 4-day week. Sorry, I was looking at some of the other really interesting questions. So with the 4-day,
just let you carry on through if you're happy.
The 4-day week is the reason why 4-day week is advantageous is because we, again, this is based on, so one of the things I'm really, it's not just me, but a whole bunch of us who are, who've been working on work organizations and how, have all this data about, oh, this is how workers can work best, is that we don't use it. We make all this evidence and no one listens to us in a way. I mean, not everyone, but the reason why 4-day week works for everyone is because rest is a part of productivity. Deliberate good rest makes work better. With automation, we'll see that the only thing that humans can provide is that creative thinking, and it's across all sorts of work. And that does not come 8 hours, 9 hours a day sitting in front of the computer or in the factory. Even factory work is what happens is productivity levels decline to the point where when you go into negative productivity, it takes more time, undoing some of the mistakes you made because you had to sit there at 5 o'clock until 5:30 just because your contract says so. So essentially working from home 4-day week, all is about, let's think about work in a different way. Let's think about work as tasks or targets to meet, and possibly values that it can contribute to in terms of societal values or company values, whatever you want. And we know as we should think about, we should also think about environmental values and social costs and values as well, right? So when we do that, then we could have very clear goals about, this is actually the part of work that is most important. and let's meet that. Like, you know, having all these meetings, doing paperwork, a lot of it actually isn't necessary. And one of the companies that have been very successful with the 4-day week or working from home, flexible working, the key things that they do is they completely looked at work in a different way. They've completely done away with all the unnecessary bits of work that wasn't actually providing any value to the company or society or the workers. They really focus on what works and done that best. What they do is to ensure that, well, as long as that is met, then you could kind of go off and enjoy yourself, and knowing that that 3-day weekend for the workers actually end up not only making those other 4 days more productive because you had ample rest. It also, as I mentioned, people only work 3 hours a day in the office when we were working 8 hours, because they were using that day, because they didn't have any other options. They were using that time to go on eBay to buy stuff, or, you know, talking to their partner, or, you know, because we were kind of constrained in the office space for 8 hours. When you relieve people, okay, you could do that on Friday, then you don't need to do it anymore. And you don't need to, you know, chat on Facebook with your friends, because you'll go meet them on Friday instead. And you actually have more meaningful, you know, conversations rather than on Twitter, let's say. I mean, I love Twitter, so I'm not going to bash Twitter. But so it's essentially about rethinking work and what our goals are, not only as an individual, but not only as a company, but as a society as a whole. And that's what I want everyone to think about when we're thinking about these things.
We've got a whole audience here definitely listening, so that's you know, that's the start, isn't it? So I mean, you can see the questions in the chat, but the next sort of question from Georgina about managers, and, you know, sort of if they've got to decide about flexibility of teams, you know, what are the implications for that, and what about personal bias? You know, how can that be done?
So unfortunately, our current cultural norm dictates that, and, you know, as I said, the pandemic and, you know, this mass scale of home working has changed that somewhat, but, you know, we are still looking into going back to these old norms about, you know, working from home, because the space of the activity isn't at the workplace. That is it work? Are you really working? Are you working, you know, or there is kind of biases against, because you can't see the other people working in their offices. It's harder to think like, oh, I'm doing all the work where everybody else is slacking off. So again, this is where that leadership really is important, where, you know, managers, company leaders, CEOs need to communicate very clearly what working from home is, what everybody, you know, what is everybody's expected to do. There are also software that enables people to kind of remove the biases, such as Trello, where there's like a kind of an online board where people could see what everybody else has been doing. But essentially, again, it goes back to this idea that, you know, as long as, you know, you could, you know, maybe make outputs and goals more clearly, and then making sure that as long as, you know, if Janine did those goals, who cares if she worked 3 hours? I shouldn't mind, as long as, you know, we have communication and we know that we are working together nicely, you know. And I think that's what really needs to be done. Again, communication, but also clarity, you know, making it very clear exactly to show people, you know, what is done and when it's done. But, you know, again, one of the dangers in that is to also, you should have spent all the time in the world making that clear. But again, communication is key here.
Thank you. I'll just quickly skim through the last few questions, just so that they can be answered, and then we can sort of make a close to this section, and give them time to discuss everything you've been talking about afterwards. So would working from home for long years, would that reduce engagement among employees? So that's that employee engagement aspect.
Yeah. So there has been companies, especially, I mean, okay, not surprisingly, companies who produce software for better teleworking, where they're all completely virtual. So these are virtual companies. But having said that, there are other companies where parts of the, like it could be PR companies, I know banking industries, where the team is virtual, not necessarily the company, but the team is virtual. How does that work with collaboration and engagement? And it's that you just find different ways of collaborating and engagement. In a way, it's better because if everybody's online, then everybody's online, and they use that online systems to ensure that people are communicating with each other. And I want to kind of bring back that example again, where the example of, accountant that was working kind of in a like governmental kind of organization where her work was in Maidstone, but there were regional offices everywhere. And she usually, she was working part-time. So she always had issues about meeting people and communicating to people, because she goes into the office, but essentially she was doing most of her work by herself in her cubicle, without talking to anyone, maybe with just her friends, right? But by having the whole team across all the regional offices being virtual, that enables so much engagement across the regions and collaboration. And in a way that provides more opportunities for collaboration, more opportunities for engagement that you would have not been able to otherwise. So this is a great opportunity, again, for certain individuals who were not necessarily able to work stay in their office for very long hours, to have those engagement opportunities. So again, this is not necessarily less engagement. We're thinking about more engagement. It's how to reflect on it and be intentional about what kind of engagement should we try to encourage, especially for whom and how.
Right, so two more questions. So I'll ask those two, and then we'll draw the questions to a close. But if a lack of trust is the barrier to flexible working, what is the solution? So it comes back to have we got apps and things that can create some trust?
I think the trust is, rather than so trust needs to come first. So trusting workers, but setting out clear standards and goals about what needs to be done, and then trusting your workers to meet them. And when that goal hasn't been met, then reflect back on why it hasn't been done. That's the way you should go, rather than monitoring until you build a trust so that you can trust them. Because without doing that, it just, because the way the mechanism works is that, you will always kind of come into the barriers in terms of meeting those targets again, but again, when you make those targets, just make it very clear exactly what they are and how they, how you expect workers to get to them.
That's good. And so final question about almost the negatives of working from home. Do you believe that more of work from home will lead to all kinds of being frustrated at being at home, lazy being around, not keeping ourselves up to date, leading to being depressed if you're home more? So a bit more about the negatives, that question.
So, again, I'm a quantitative data scientist, so I rely on surveys on what people tell us. And what people tell us is that it has improved. There has been a huge negative, mental health crisis because of the pandemic, because people have not been able to hug friends for 15 months. But, essentially working from home is not it can lead to isolation, but I don't think necessarily in itself is the problem. I think once people start working from home and you have a pattern of working from home, and again, when we start working from home, not just like this ad hoc one day here, one day there, but really regularly, well, we see that people start kind of developing, good habits of, going for walks in the afternoon, or even taking up other leisurely activities. So, I have seen people who take up they have a lunchtime boxing training in the afternoon, and something that they wouldn't be able to do when they were commuting back and forth from the office. But they were able to squeeze that in, and they use that time. They catch up in the evening, and they were able to do that. And I think a lot of people also start kind of engaging on lunch dates, when they're working from home as well, as long as it's regular. Obviously, lots of us, including myself, we have the dog. So the dog, gets me out of the house. And then you start, once this becomes normalized and you have a more regular pattern, a stable pattern of working from home, you will see patterns of behaviors. And what I'm really excited about is, especially once working from home becomes, more normalized, where you'd work 4 or 5 days a week at home, the geographical inequalities or the developments of communities. The UK has a real big issue that it is very London focused in terms of economic progress. Housing prices are extortionate, and that there are regions across the UK which could really benefit from an economic boost. If we were to give people the opportunity to live geographically anywhere they want, we might be able to see a movement of people and the economy, a flow of money into regions where we need it most. And when people work from home, they will be able to rejuvenate some of that economy by, you know, okay, you don't go into the city of London and use Costa as Rishi Sunak wants you to, but you go into your local cafe and grab a coffee and use the local gym and use that local economy and rejuvenate that. And I think that's what the UK actually needs at this moment. So, yes, and someone just said that they rebranded lunch as a wellness hour, and please encourage that, because again, science, as the scientific evidence is that rather than sitting in your bum for 8 hours a day, you need that deliberate rest in the middle of your brain to need done in the morning, so you could be more productive in the afternoon, so that you see afternoon dips. But to overcome that, you need that kind of wellness break or wellness hour, as Morgan said. I believe.
Thank you. And I think, you know, we can all plan that in tomorrow then. Everyone, if they haven't got their definite break planned in, then, you know, if, you know, that could be their main takeaway to implement immediately from your talk. Well, thank you so much, Hee-jung. I mean, you've got some claps going on around the audience there. I mean, that's been amazing, and obviously all the questions coming through across the whole range of issues you've been talking about. It's been really great to have you share that with us, and really great in terms of our networking sessions to be able to have so many people join us in this virtual world. And like we were saying, I'm sure this has made it easier for some people to be able to come and hear you speak and fit it around whatever else they're doing. As much as we're looking forward to being back on campus eventually and welcoming businesses back on to work with us in lots of different ways, I've no doubt that this has enabled a lot more people to hear about our great expertise and what's going on. So thank you.